The land remembers men who choose silence, and sometimes it tests them. Out past Dry Knife Ridge, where the trail's thin and the hills fold inward, a man who hadn't spoken to a woman in years was about to be found. Before we get into it, take a second to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story begins in a place most people never go, and with a man who didn't want to be found at all. Thor Maddox hadn't spoken more than a dozen words to anyone in nearly 3 years, and that was by design. He'd built his life on distance and quiet, on land so rough and cut through with juniper and dry gullies that only someone who knew it could ride in or out, without breaking a leg. No clean trails, no easy paths, just stone, brush, and long stretches of nothing. That was why he'd settled there. That and the silence. At 46, Thor was tall and lean, ringy in the way men get when their strength comes from work instead of youth. His arms were thick from splitting wood and mending fence, his face weathered and still. A thin scar ran across his left cheekbone, a souvenir from a cavalry skirmish he rarely thought about anymore. Folks down in Copperan had stopped asking why he lived so far out. They'd heard enough. They knew about his wife and the child she carried, both taken by measles the winter of '74. What sickness didn't claim, fire did later on, and after that, Thor Maddox closed himself off. He worked land that barely paid him back, didn't raise cattle, traded repairs and fence work for dried food and ammunition. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, and he didn't open his door. That was how it stayed until the sound came, low and uneven, crunching over hard-packed earth from the ridge trail. His body moved before his mind did. He set down the piece of pine he'd been carving, rose slowly from the porch chair, and let his hand hover near the old revolver on his hip. Too heavy for deer, too light for a horse, not a wagon. He stepped off the porch into the yard, eyes narrowing. They came into view slowly at the fence line, like they weren't sure they'd reached anything real. 3 figures barefoot, clothes torn and dust-stained. The oldest looked around 30, tall and broad-shouldered, arms marked with cuts, one lip split and swollen, her dark hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She walked straight, despite the pain you could see in her stride. The second, maybe mid-20s, limped slightly, her dress slipping off one shoulder, the neckline torn and showing bruising along her collarbone. Her hand hovered near her side, fingers tight with tension. The youngest stayed half-hidden behind them, wrapped in a worn blanket like a shield, eyes too wide, too watchful. Thor didn't speak. He didn't move. The oldest lifted her chin and met his gaze without flinching. "We need shelter," she said. Her voice was rough, but steady. "We won't steal. Just a few nights. We'll work." She didn't beg. She didn't explain. The girl behind her looked like she might break at any sound, her eyes darting to the trees, the sky, the dirt under her feet. The middle woman shifted her weight carefully, avoiding her injured ankle, eyes fixed on the ground as if expecting a door to slam or a hand to strike. Thor clenched his jaw. He didn't ask why they were there. The bruises said enough. Torn cloth, guarded stairs, bodies carrying what words didn't need to. He'd seen that look before, after raids, after men had taken more than land. His eyes flicked to the water pump, the barn, then back to them. He gave a single nod. For a moment they didn't move. Then the oldest stepped forward, guiding the limping woman gently, glancing at Thor just once. He didn't stop them. He didn't reach for his pistol. That alone told them more than words could. He didn't offer them the house. Not yet. But he swung the barn door wide. Inside it was clean. Fresh straw, a full water barrel, folded blankets near the bench. He'd slept there himself more nights than he could count. They took the loft. Thor stayed on the porch that night, shotgun across his knees, eyes on the dark. He told himself it was foolish, that strangers meant trouble, that someone might come looking for them. But then he remembered the limp, the way the youngest clung to her sister's arm, the way the oldest had stood straight and said, "We'll work." Morning came without trouble. He hauled firewood, fed the gelding, fixed a loose hinge on the gate. When he went for his tin cup, he found it cleaned and set upside down by the basin. The bucket had been emptied and refilled, the trough scrubbed, rope recoiled neat as you please. He squinted toward the barn. The limping woman stood there, slow but steady, scooping hay. Her shawl had slipped down her back, exposing dark hair and the torn neckline again. She didn't rush to fix it. Maybe she didn't notice. Maybe she didn't care. Inside, the oldest stacked kindling by the stove. The youngest sat near the fence, knees pulled up, glancing at Thor, then quickly away. He left food on the porch that day and said nothing. When he came back, the plates were cleaned and set where he'd left them. They stayed another night, then another. No demands, no questions. Thor didn't count the days, not directly. He measured time by clean plates, lantern light through barn slats, chores done without being asked. After 4 days, he noticed it anyway. He found the limping woman feeding the mule one morning, barefoot in the hard soil. The animal trusted her. Thor watched longer than he meant to. Her dress hung loose, torn again above the chest, collar fallen low. She didn't pull it up when she saw him. "You don't have to feed it," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "It likes me," she answered quietly, not turning. He didn't argue. Later he asked what he'd avoided. "You running from someone." The oldest answered for them, voice flat, explaining men who came under the guise of trade and left ruin behind. Thor didn't ask for details. He let them into the house that afternoon, just the front room and kitchen. He left folded quilts and clean clothes on the table, his wife's things untouched for years. He didn't explain. When he returned, the clothes were gone. The quilts folded neater, a pot of beans simmering. That night, the limping woman stood on the porch under the stars and whispered, "Thank you." Thor didn't answer, but she didn't seem to need one. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was something else, something breathing, and Thor Maddox wasn't sure yet what to do with that. The days settled into a rhythm none of them spoke aloud. Thor rose before first light, split wood, checked the fence lines, and walked the land the way he always had, slow and deliberate. When he returned by mid-morning, the porch steps were swept, the ash pan emptied, and the barn already tended. The women didn't wait for instruction. They worked like people who understood that labor was safer than stillness. Leia's ankle healed slowly. She limped less each day but never complained, carrying water with both hands, washing his extra shirts, mending seams without being asked. When Thor tried to take a pail from her once, she held it tighter and said simply, "I can." He let go. Asha watched everything. She moved through the house with guarded purpose, checking the pantry, clearing brush from the foundation, stacking wood higher than needed. She asked once about a spare rifle. Thor said he had one. She didn't ask again, but from then on, there was always a weapon close when he wasn't home. Nomi stayed quiet but busy, brushing the mule each morning, sorting beans into neat piles, humming the same low tune as if it anchored her to the world. Loud noises still made her flinch, but her voice slowly returned, sentence by sentence. Thor noticed something he hadn't expected. He no longer listened for silence. He listened for them. The scrape of boots on the porch, the low murmur near the stove, Nomi's hum drifting through the barn slats. It should have unsettled him. Instead, it grounded him. One afternoon, a rider appeared on the far ridge, moving slow, scanning the land. Thor saw the dust first, then the shape of horse and man. He took down his rifle and waited. The rider didn't come closer. After a long pause, he turned back. That night, Thor told them, Asha stiffened and said they should leave. Thor shook his head. "Running won't help," he said. "You got walls here, food, and someone who'll shoot back." She studied him a long moment, then nodded. That night, Leia lingered after supper while the others turned in. She stood in the doorway barefoot, shawl around her shoulders. "Why are you helping us?"
she asked quietly.
Thor didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Didn't seem right to send you off." She sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth, not close enough to demand more. After a while, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Just once, just long enough for the noise inside her to ease. He didn't pull away. 2 days later, the men came. 3 riders this time, hard and careless, confident in numbers. Thor saw them crest the ridge and knew. He told the women to stay inside. Asha didn't argue, but she took the spare rifle anyway. The men rode into the yard loud, eyes roaming, hands loose near their guns. Thor stood on the porch, rifle steady. "Turn around," he said. They laughed. One stepped forward. Thor fired once, clean and deliberate, the bullet tearing into the dirt inches from the man's boot. Last warning. The men hesitated. Usher stepped into view behind him, rifle raised, eyes cold. That did it. The riders backed off, curses trailing as they turned and disappeared down the trail. Silence followed, heavy and shaking. No one spoke for a long time. That night, they sat together at the table, 4 plates, 1 pot. Nomi smiled for the first time. Asha finally let herself breathe. Leia watched Thor like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Days passed. No riders returned. The fear loosened its grip. One evening, as the sun bled red over the ridge, Leia stood beside Thor on the porch. "We'll leave soon," she said. He nodded, though something in his chest tightened. Morning came, and they didn't pack. Another day passed, then another. No one said anything about staying. They just did. One night, as the stars burned bright and the land lay quiet, Leia reached for his hand. He didn't hesitate. The ranch was still remote, still rough, but it wasn't empty anymore. Thor Maddox had built his life on silence. He learned too late and just in time that sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's just waiting for someone brave enough to knock.